When words become worthless paper and fists become the only classroom Korean education has finally met its rebel. On the 5th of June 2026, Netflix released a drama called Iron Fist Education. It became the #1 show on Netflix in Korea right after its first episode aired and ranked third among non-English series worldwide. It scored 8.8 out of 10 on Douban with nearly 90,000 ratings. This is not just an ordinary feel-good drama, it is a loud slap across the face of a broken education system. The school bully never dreamed in his wildest dreams that someone would actually dare to hit him. Then this slap was an astonishing feat carried out in full view of everyone. The students all wore expressions of disbelief. This made the school bully lose face completely. This left everyone stunned on the spot. And just then, the school bully's boss walked over. They thought that with so many students taking out their phones to record, it would make the other person feel afraid. The school bully who had been beaten earlier saw this and became arrogant again. He told the man to go ahead and hit him again, in front of all those cameras if he had the guts. When the man heard that the school bully had such a strange request, he immediately helped him up because that made it easier for him to deliver a better slap. In an instant, various videos of educating students were filmed as short clips and posted online. They were like bombs thrown into a lake, causing a huge stir on the internet. Soon, the school authorities were alerted. When they saw that the school bully's face was swollen from the beating, they immediately demanded to know who the man was and why he had hit their student. But the other person kept a faint smile, calmly and unhurriedly searched for his identification. He fumbled around for a while and finally pulled out a credential they had never seen before. But even if there was a Teaching Authority Protection Bureau, he didn't have the right to hit people, did he? Unexpectedly, the other person's words instantly left him speechless.
애를 이렇게 패도 되는 거예요?
패도 됩니다. 교권보호국 감독관에게는 한 가지 특수한 권한이 있습니다. 교육 방식에 그 어떠한 제한도 없다. 쉽게 설명드리면 말로 해서 듣는 놈은 말로, 때려서 듣는 놈은 때려서라도 가르칩니다. 대한민국 교권보호국은 오늘부로 이 학교를 참교육하겠습니다.
This is Iron Fist Education, the latest drama aired in 2026, a thought-provoking drama on the theme of education. So today, let's follow my perspective and step into the first episode of Iron Fist Education. In South Korea, there is a school like this. On average, one student jumps off the building every week. When Gyeomdae saw this, he was scared out of his wits, because the classmate who died was the enemy of the whole school chosen by the school bully. Any student who received this honor would not only be isolated by all the other students, but would also suffer all kinds of bullying from the school bully every day. This kind of life was more torturous than being in hell, and as long as the enemy of the whole school was alive, he had to endure this torment for another day. That was why so many students chose to jump off the building. Now that the previous person was dead, Gyeomdae became the new enemy of the whole school. The torment and bullying that others had suffered before would now be inflicted on him every single day. This put immense pressure on his body and mind. At all times. Finally, he also went to that rooftop, wanting to jump down and end this painful life. But in the end, because of fear, he got scared and ran back. The school bully deliberately picked a fight with him again. But seeing Gyeomdae's submissive nature, the school bully no longer found any pleasure in bullying him, so he deliberately provoked him to fight back. But how could Gyeomdae dare to hit back? He let the school bully hit and scold him, and remained silent the whole time. The other students were already used to seeing this. After the school bully gave him a harsh lesson, he still felt unsatisfied, so he told Gyeomdae to hit him back again.
치라고 씨발로마 자. 오케이.
Unexpectedly, he happened to run into Hwa-jin, which is how the earlier scene came about. Afterwards, the principal met with Hwa-jin alone and tried to persuade him to leave. Because the school bully's boss was the child of a National Assembly member, the principal voluntarily revealed the power behind the students, hoping that Hwa-jin would not get involved in this mess. Little did he know that Hwa-jin was not afraid of the powerful, and he also had backing behind him. This time, he came to completely rectify the corrupt school atmosphere. The new homeroom teacher, during his first class with the students, made everyone do a plank for 2 hours. One poor student, relying on being a follower of the school bully, kept shouting arrogantly at the teacher. The teacher's swift and decisive action
학교 옥상에서 이렇게 떨어져서 죽었다. 아따 고동매 주둥아리.
Instantly intimidated many of the bad students. Then the teacher repeated his earlier demand, telling them to get down on the floor immediately. Hua Jin didn't expect that, even in this situation, someone would still dare to openly defy the homeroom teacher's orders. In fact, his authority overshadowed the teacher's presence. But the homeroom teacher wasn't angry. Instead, he became excited, because now, if he could subdue just this one person, he could manage the most chaotic class.
앉아!
No one expected that the homeroom teacher would so forcefully pin the school bully down on the desk. No matter how much the school bully struggled, it was useless.
너 학생 아니야?
So he brought out his backing again. Then, the homeroom teacher started counting again. Although the school bully was unwilling, he still took the lead and started doing the plank. When the other students saw this, they quickly left their seats and followed suit, doing the plank as well. They thought the school bully would tone it down a bit. But when lunchtime came, while the other students were lining up for food, he and his followers grabbed a lunchbox at random and cut to the front of the line. The auntie at the front enthusiastically served him food, but then she stopped. It turned out that the man serving the food was his homeroom teacher. Hua Jin told the school bully to go back and wait in line. No one expected that he would directly stick his hand into the food tray, then take his lunchbox and leave. But he didn't eat it. Instead, he angrily threw it into the trash can. Then the homeroom
미안. 내가 먹을 거 함부로 하는 걸 못 참아. 어떡하냐 이거?
teacher picked up a mop and started cleaning the floor, as if he were cleaning up trash. Little did he know that the teacher's actions were not even 1/10 as bad as the school bully's misdeeds. Junhyung knew he was no match for the homeroom teacher, so he chose to temporarily endure and hide his anger. He wanted to go back and tell his father, who was preparing to run for president. Little did he know that Hua Jin had arrived at his house before him and was leisurely eating fruit. When Junhyung came home and saw this, he immediately had a bad feeling. His feeling was correct, because Hua Jin's purpose in coming this time was to discipline him properly on behalf of his father. Although the assemblyman was extremely angry inside, he wore a fake smile on his face. Hua Jin, regardless of whether he was willing to accept this fact, then, in his capacity as a teacher, prepared to take Junhyung back to school to fulfill his cleaning duties. And so, the homeroom teacher forcibly took Junhyung away and punished him by making him clean the restroom. Unexpectedly, the effect was far better than he had imagined, because Junhyung understood that if he didn't do a good job today, the homeroom teacher wouldn't let him go. After the homeroom teacher left, his unwilling anger surged up instantly. Then he did something crazy. He voluntarily slammed his head into the toilet, hoping to frame the homeroom teacher. Afterwards, his father came to Hua Jin and demanded an explanation for his son's injury. Faced with the assemblyman's threats, Hua Jin maintained his original attitude. This completely enraged the assemblyman, who prepared to use his power to make Hua Jin understand the consequences of offending him. So he personally went to see the Minister of Education. He intended to use his status and position to threaten the minister into abolishing the Teaching Authority Protection Bureau. But he didn't know that the minister had been planning this matter for a full 2 years with the goal of thoroughly rectifying the unhealthy trends in schools. That was why he had arranged for Hua Jin, a special forces instructor, to personally go and rectify the schools with severe problems. At this point, how could he possibly give up the rectification plan? Seeing that he couldn't persuade the minister, the assemblyman left a threatening remark. But he never dreamed that the minister had already gathered evidence of his crimes, which detailed all kinds of his scandals, and chose to expose his crimes. At the critical moment when he was preparing for his election campaign, after the reporters saw it, it was as if they had stumbled upon a huge scoop. They immediately surrounded the assemblyman who had come to the scene. Faced with the sudden negative news, the assemblyman angrily ordered his subordinates to investigate, while he himself hid in the lecture room. He was just about to make a phone call to find someone to settle the matter, when he discovered the minister sitting under the lecture podium. Only then did he realize that the minister was the one behind it all. Hearing that the minister had made him a sacrificial pawn just to advance the Teaching Authority Protection Bureau, he flew into a rage.
설마 당신이 한 짓이야? 누구 사주박도 한 짓이야?
But the minister only said one thing calmly.
네가 무너져야 네 아들이 무너질 테니까. 그러게 애 새끼 교육을 좀 잘 시켰어야지.
Without the protection of his father, the once arrogant and domineering school bully, has now been branded the enemy of the entire school by the other students. Perhaps this is karma. School bullying has never been just a scuffle between children. It is the evil fruit born from the dislocation of power. Privilege, protection, and indulgence allow the wicked to bully the weak, even driving vulnerable students to despair and suicide. This is a blatant challenge to the bottom line of the law. In the end, all the school bullies who drove their classmates to death were arrested and taken to the police station. Justice will ultimately be served. However, bullies like Junhyung are far from the only ones. In South Korea, gangsters have long developed a mature operational model. They treat vocational schools as legitimate places to train their underlings. They never bring books to class. Teachers dare not go against the students' will, or else they will be severely beaten. Even worse, there are students who, during class, demand that the teacher design a beautiful tattoo for them. This vocational school has long been notorious, more like a gang hideout. Yet, there is one student who spared no expense to transfer to this school. But as soon as he arrived at the school gate, he was knocked flying by a speeding biker. They raced their motorcycles recklessly on campus. This place is nothing like a school should be. After finally making it to the classroom, he saw the students below, who showed no resemblance to students at all. Frightened, he could only sit down by the window on the side. But what he never expected was that, under the threat of the gang leader, the teacher would be so scared that he fled in panic. Then, the gang leader prepared to take all the students to clear a dungeon. At first, Guillaume-Day didn't understand what clearing a dungeon meant. It wasn't until everyone brought out weapons that he realized they were going out for a gang fight. Although both sides were students, their level of brutality was no less than that of real gangsters on the streets. The reason they were so keen on fighting in groups was not only to show off their status in society, but also because the gang had a rule when recruiting new members. The better you are at fighting, the more money you will make when you join the organization. After each fight, the school bully would conduct a strength assessment, so he pulled out Guillaume-Day, who had just transferred to the school, and made him fight the measurer. The loser would become the strength measurer. At this moment, Guillaume-Day didn't know what a strength measurer was, but under the threat of the gang leader, he still ended up fighting Hyungju. What they didn't expect was that Hyungju actually took the initiative to let Guillaume-Day hit him. To prevent Guillaume-Day from getting beaten, Hyungju willingly took all the punishment. Because the strength measurer's job was to get beaten, in order to test the fighting ability of these thugs. After each severe beating, Hyungju took a long time to recover. Seeing this, Guillaume-Day couldn't help but feel concerned. Unexpectedly, Hyungju even took the initiative to invite him to his home for ramen. Hyungju's family was poor. The whole family relied solely on his mother to make a living. That was why Hyungju hoped to study professional knowledge well, so that he could get a job and earn money. Therefore, no matter how terrible the learning environment was, he could only endure it silently. One day, when he came to school again, he found that they were using another student as the strength measurer. If he stepped in at that moment, then he would become the strength measurer, always getting beaten by those ruthless guys. The person who arrived was Hua Jin, a prosecutor from the Teaching Authority Protection Bureau. Guillaume-Day, who had transferred to the school earlier, was also a member of the Teaching Authority Protection Bureau. His purpose in infiltrating this school was to understand the real problems that existed there so that Hua Jin could step in and solve them. To help these students turn over a new leaf, Hua Jin asked Guillaume-Day to deliberately provoke this group of thug students, luring them into the multimedia classroom. After everyone rushed inside, he directly locked the door from the outside. What they didn't expect was that Hua Jin was not afraid at all. Instead, he ordered them to sit down and study obediently. This immediately infuriated the thugs, and they decided to teach Hua Jin a harsh lesson. After all, they had long been prepared to drop out of school. But when Hua Jin heard their thoughts, he gave them 3 choices. The first choice was to repay all the educational funds the country had spent on them before leaving. The second choice was much simpler. At that moment, their only thought was to defeat Hua Jin and then leave arrogantly. Little did they know that the person they were facing was actually the instructor of South Korea's top special forces. With effortless ease, he easily dodged the students' attacks. Seeing that he had played around enough, he immediately struck back, ready to teach these kids a lesson. But these people were no match for Hua Jin. In Hua Jin's eyes, they were nothing but a bunch of overgrown babies. Fortunately, he only intended to teach them a lesson, so he didn't go too hard on them. Soon, he had taken down every single one of them. Then he continued with the third choice. That choice was for the teacher to write the lesson on the blackboard. while the students took notes themselves. The instructor ordered everyone to finish copying it within 3 minutes, but these students hadn't even brought pens. They thought this would let them off the hook. Little did they expect that the instructor would come up with a ruthless idea. They had to write it down using their own blood. The thugs were stunned when they heard this. They scrambled to find pens by any means necessary. Soon, the 3-minute countdown ended. The instructor immediately went up and erased the lesson from the blackboard. Those who hadn't finished copying had to obediently accept the instructor's punishment. Each one got a hit under the armpit. After this lesson, when the teacher wrote the lesson on the blackboard again, the students all began to copy it seriously. Faced with such boring coursework, the school bully was about to go crazy.
내가 이까짓 수업 왜 들어야 되는데?
수업 받고 싶은 새끼만 수업 받으면 되지. 왜 받기 싫은 사람까지 억지로 수업 받아야 되는데?
인생을 깨서도 만드는데?
Afterwards, the instructor organized a practical experience class for the students, but they still had no interest in learning. Instead, their minds were on fooling around. The instructor quickly came up with another idea. He called 2 troublemakers from the class up to demonstrate, asking them to repair the brakes. So, the instructor forcibly pulled the 2 troublemakers into the car. He decided to let them experience firsthand what it felt like to drive a car with broken brakes. As the instructor stepped on the gas pedal, the car let out a roaring sound. Only then did they realize what a nightmare truly was. The scene just now made them feel as if they had taken a stroll through the hands of death. Then, the instructor took them for a few wild spins around the open space in front of the teaching building. After that, he drove the car straight toward the teaching building. They were completely terrified. It wasn't until the instructor pulled off a perfect drift that the car came to a steady stop, and he hoped that through this method, they would maintain a serious attitude when repairing cars. Otherwise, in the future, they could cost someone their life. Every night, the instructor would lock the dormitory door to prevent them from contacting the thugs on the streets, but they were determined to escape through the window. In the end, they used a knife to remove the screws from the window and took the window off. Now they could finally escape. Then, they went to find their big brother on the streets and told him about what had happened to them at school, hoping that he would stand up for them. The next day, when the instructor was supervising them again during class, the 2 troublemakers walked in arrogantly from outside with Guillaume Day. As the instructor looked at them with confusion, their boss rode a motorcycle into the classroom. The underlings on the scene cheered, believing that with their boss here, they would be saved. Little did they know that all of this was a scheme set up by the instructor. His goal was to lure out their boss. By following the principle of catching the ringleader first, he intended to completely cut off the students' desire to get involved with gangs. Before long, the gang boss was easily subdued by the instructor, but he refused to accept defeat and was ready to keep fighting for a win. However, in less than 2 seconds, he was humiliated again. The instructor even flicked him on the forehead with a snap of his fingers. This made him even angrier. He charged again, only to be flicked on the forehead once more. Then, the instructor dragged him directly to the school gate. Today, he was going to completely crush the power behind him, making these thugs understand that the school was off limits to them. The reason he told him to step aside was because, from now on, this place would be the arena for his showdown with the gang. He warned the gang members not to even think about entering the school, or else he would show no mercy. The gang members, however, became even more excited upon hearing this. Then, they climbed into the school one after another, ready to teach this middle-aged man a harsh lesson. But what happened next terrified everyone completely, because every time the man struck, someone fell. Some suffered minor fractures, while others were knocked down and couldn't get up. In less than a minute of fighting, dozens of gang members were all taken down. Seeing that things were going wrong, the gang boss tried to escape by crawling into his car, but unexpectedly, the next second, when the instructor walked into the school again, all the thug students were completely stunned. Only then did they realize just how ruthless the instructor in front of them truly was. They immediately fell to their knees and begged for mercy. The instructor did not punish them.
생각해봐. 니들이 누구한테 싸워야 되는지.
야, 영자!
미안하다. 용서해라. 살려줘라. 야, 살려줘. 아니야.
네가 용서해야 우리 살아. 아 진짜 괜찮아. 이러지 마. 괜찮아.
Instead, he made the two troublemakers apologize to the classmates they had bullied. From that day on, the unhealthy atmosphere in the auto repair vocational school was completely rectified. Yiri was only a high school student, yet she had 500,000 followers. This made her an idol in the eyes of her classmates. But during class, the school had a rule that students were not allowed to use their phones. The teacher kindly greeted her fans before confiscating her phone. Even so, some students still stood up for her, and it was precisely this action that made Yeri hold a grudge against the math teacher. Not long after, the teacher received retaliation from Yeri. Yeri had actually posted a maliciously edited video on her social media account. It turned out that the math teacher had confiscated Yeri's phone, which led to this revenge. For this reason, the homeroom teacher offered to help resolve the conflict. Afterwards, he found Yeri and asked her how she could delete those videos because he had accidentally witnessed the process of them maliciously editing the footage. When the homeroom teacher told her what he had seen, Yeri showed no sign of remorse and had no intention of deleting the maliciously edited videos. Instead, she came up with the idea of harming the homeroom teacher. So, after the conversation, she suddenly made a crazy decision. She deliberately messed up her own clothes and then falsely accused the homeroom teacher of harassing her, posting the video on social media. Her pitiful appearance instantly sparked a wave of condemnation from countless fans. The comment section was filled with abuse, with people calling the homeroom teacher a beast. Some even doxed the homeroom teacher's detailed personal information, planning to come to the school to retaliate against him. Instantly, countless phone calls flooded the school. People from all walks of life condemned the homeroom teacher's immoral behavior. No one questioned what the truth really was. They simply assumed the homeroom teacher was a hypocrite in human clothing. Although the school tried its best to clarify the situation, unexpectedly, someone had already sneaked into the school office and started a live broadcast exposing his condition. This plunged the homeroom teacher even deeper into a living hell. He didn't know how to explain himself. Even his wife suspected him of having an affair. He could only hide at school, too afraid to go anywhere. Finally, in the dead of night, he chose to commit suicide in his car. The next day, someone discovered the dead teacher, but he could never have dreamed that, even after his death, these bloggers who only cared about chasing clout, along with those fans who blindly lashed out without knowing the truth, would still refuse to let him go. They even caused a scene at his funeral. The math teacher, enraged, found the culprit, Yeri, and demanded that she immediately take down those defamatory videos. Yeri pretended to be innocent, even with tears glistening in her eyes, as if she were the one who had been wronged the most. But when she turned around, it was revealed that she was live streaming at that very moment. Her tearful performance once again won her even more sympathy from her fans. Not only did they fail to reflect on Yeri's character, but they even believed that Teacher Go's death was a suicide to escape punishment, and that he deserved to die. To put an end to the matter, the principal finally granted her special privileges, allowing her to live stream freely during class. Only then did she stop fanning the flames online. When the math teacher stood at the podium again, he seemed like a walking corpse. She no longer understood the meaning of education or her own purpose at the podium. If a teacher's dignity could be trampled on by students at will, even to the point of losing their life, and she was powerless to do anything about it, then she could only mechanically teach the lesson, letting the students play on their phones in class. As for Yeri, she took the initiative to show off her victory. To the math teacher, there was nothing anyone could do. At that moment, the classroom had become a suffocating hell. This matter was soon reported to the Teaching Authority Protection Bureau. They decided to make this school the focus of their next rectification. However, the main problem at this school was a cunning female student. For this reason, Hua-jin decided not to handle it personally this time. Instead, he introduced a new member. He was confident that this instructor would be able to complete the mission successfully. Ham Rim came to their class as a trainee teacher, but when the math teacher introduced her to the students, not a single one of them was listening. They were all busy with their own things. Even when she took the initiative to greet the students, no one paid her any attention. None of them realized the seriousness of the situation. They continued to make noise below. While Yeri was live streaming, she sized up Ham Rim, feeling that she was somehow different from the other teachers. So she signaled her deskmate to test her.
왜요? 쌤 진짜 예쁜데. 상영 완전 잘 됐어요. 선은 가뿐히 남겼을 것 같은데 얼마나 잘 됐는지 보게 비포도 보여주시면 안 돼요? 얘들아, 너네 궁금하지? 궁금하지?
Ham Rim walked up to them and actually admitted that she had undergone plastic surgery.
네, 성형했습니다. 가슴 축소 수술. 제가 취미가 운동이라 이게 확 불편해서 했습니다. 근데 우리 반에는 딱히 축소가 필요한 학생은 없어 보이니까 추가 질문은 거절합니다.
They never would have expected that the new trainee teacher would be this crazy. Little did they know, this wasn't even the appetizer. The first time the new trainee teacher gave a lesson to the students, she demanded that all of them hand over their phones.
한예리 학생, 휴대폰 제출합니다.
저 방송 중이라서요.
But Yeri, relying on her status as a major internet influencer, didn't take the new teacher seriously at all. Instead, she used the pressure from her fans to threaten the teacher. The other students watched, waiting to see the joke unfold. Unexpectedly, the next second,